Ephesians chapter 2. You know, a lot of times as we just have opportunity to sit around and think, I said we, but I probably ought to just say I, think about the circumstance and situation of the world wherein we live. And I think about some of the things going on. I try not to let myself get wrapped up in the news and reports and things of this nature. I try not to allow myself to do that, but yet I still think upon the major events that go on, and I think about how they kind of fit in to God's plan, how they sort of work with all the things that are going on, or the things that the Bible tells us, and the design that God has for this world. I kind of think of those things. A lot of times we get all wrapped up in it, don't we? And we get fearful, we get excited, we get all emotional about the things, and we feel like that it's just all chaos and there's no control and things of this nature. And you know, as we think about that, in my mind, I just kind of run through it and think, all's not lost. God's still in control. I might not see the plan, I might not see the purpose, I might not see the big picture. But I know from what God's Word tells me that He's in control and that He has everything laid out. He has a plan and a purpose for all that come about. And I have to believe that. And then I go beyond that and I begin to think, well, what's the problem with this world? What's the things that's going on? Why are we seeing a lot of the things that we're seeing? Well, there's a sickness in this world, isn't there? There's a sickness. We have to realize that and come to grips with that, and then figure out what we have to do to get beyond or to repair that. And I think that's what Paul is trying to help us with here in chapter 2. I'm going to begin reading in verse 1. It says, "And you hath He quickened, who were dead in trespasses and sin, wherein in time past you walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience, among whom also we all had our conversation in time past, in the lust of our flesh, fulfilling desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath, even as others. But God, who is rich in mercy, for His great love, wherewith He loved us, even when we were dead in sins, hath quickened us together with Christ. By grace ye are saved." I want to think about the first 3 verses to begin with. It tells us here that He has quickened us, who were dead in our trespasses and sin, who in time past we walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air. We were children of disobedience. We had our conversation in the flesh. He tells us that we are the problem, or we were the problem. If you're not a Christian this morning, you're still part of the problem. But He tells us that we were part of that problem. You know, there's a sickness in this world. And the truth is, we are all affected to some point, right? We're all still completely infected, or we still have varying degrees of it affecting our lives at times. We have to understand that. You know, sometimes we even are at the point to where we're standing on the front lines of Satan's army marching forward. You may say, "Well, preacher, why do you say that?" And I said, well, at one time I was that. You know, we have to understand that there's only 2 teams here. You know, the world likes to think that we're a 3-team world. You know, they like to think that there's a good, a bad, and kind of an indifferent. A place there in the middle that we can settle. A place there in the middle that we're safe and we really don't have to be one or the other and we're okay. That as long as we're modestly good, that God will accept, God will reward, God will take home. You know, we have that mindset. This world does. But we're just a two-team world. We're either playing for God or we're playing for Satan. And we sometimes forget that, don't we? The thing about my life is I have to understand that, at times, at varying degrees, as I said, I swap teams. Satan will infiltrate my camp, so to speak. And before you know it, we have some sort of anger well up in us. We have something that affects us in this world. There's things that come at us, and before you know it, we're angry at this world, or we're angry at somebody in this world, and it's all because Satan has just kind of dropped a note or dropped something in my life to cause me to do that. And we see those things a lot, and we experience those things a lot in our lives, don't we? We may not be on the front lines. We may not be selling drugs on the street corner or things of this nature, being in the front lines of Satan's army, but still yet, varying degrees affect our life. We have to understand that. For those standing on the front lines, they're ready and willing to spread and impose this disease on anybody they come in contact with. This disease called sin. That's the way I was at one point in time in my life. This sickness, this disease of sin. Ephesians chapter 6 tells us in verse 12, says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." Sometimes we think or we feel like that we're up against something that we can handle, up against something that we can control, up against things that are not that great or grand, but the truth is we're battling something that's much greater than we can ever understand. Think about how much power Satan has in this world. I'm not trying to tell you that he's more powerful than God, because he's not. God's in control. I already told you that. He's got a plan and a purpose, and in that plan and purpose, he has allowed Satan to have his area, his small area. He's got his hand around his neck, but he's got his small area. You can do this, you can tempt, you can try, you can do whatever to a certain degree. And if you don't think that, just flip over into Job and look at Job, and whenever Satan comes before God and they're talking about Job, God says, okay, you can do this, but there's a limit. God has a limit on him, on Satan. We look in the world that we live and we see all the violence and all the things that are going on, and we wonder sometimes maybe if God does have him limited, but he does. Imagine if he just took that off, what this world would be. But the thing is, in our own life, sometimes we feel like that we can handle it. We'll have little things come up in our life, or we'll have the indignations of anger or whatever come up in our life, and we'll say, well, I can handle this. This is justified. I deserve, or I need to be able to do these things. And the truth is, we're never justified in those things. We never have that ability to do that or to control those things. We have to understand that we can't handle it. And that it often, when we think about sin, it begins with one, doesn't it? And it expands. It begins with one, and that being ourselves, and it expands to our families or our home, and then into our communities, and then into our country, and then the world. Before you know it, it's all infected. As I thought about this message and I thought about the events over the past couple of years, when we first heard about COVID, what did we hear? We heard about a couple of people who were infected in a foreign country, right? A couple of people who were infected in a foreign country. And then what did we hear? The next thing we knew, it had spread all through that country. The next thing we knew, it had spread all through the continent. The next thing we knew, it had jumped the oceans and it was on every continent. Guess what? Sin is exactly the same way. That's a perfect example of what sin does. It begins with one. It affects the immediate and expands from there. And Satan's whole intent and his whole desire is to see it spread in every corner of the universe. It, like the disease that we've seen over the last couple of years, sin never stops growing and it never stops evolving. It just keeps doing the things that will draw its attention and expand its touch into this world. The thing is, we as humans, we've tried a lot of different tactics to combat it, haven't we? We've tried a lot of different things to try to ease this out, but they all fail. And that's because we're trying the human side of it. You know, the problem is sin, and until we realize it's sin and not something in this world, then we're never going to know what the cure is. And what is the cure? You know, the cure doesn't come from or through programs and community renovations and things of this nature. It doesn't come through that. The cure cannot start on the outside. Now, you look into a lot of the communities that have been devastated by sin throughout our country, and what have they done? They've went in and they've had revitalization projects. They'll go in and they'll rebuild the areas, the communities. They'll re-beautify them. They'll plant trees and flowers and paint and all the different things, and the place looks perfect. But the problem has never been resolved. The next thing you know, what we have graffiti on the walls and things tore up in the same situation again, right? It's because it hadn't been resolved. It doesn't start on the outside. It has to start in the middle, at the heart. It has to start with our hearts. You know, there in verse 4 it says, but God. I like it when the Bible says, but God. That means something's about to happen. It means something's about to change. It tells us there in those first 3 verses that we were a part of the problem. But God, who is rich in mercy for His great love, wherewith He loved us, even when we were dead in sins, hath quickened us together with Christ. For by grace you're saved. You see, He knew what the problem was and had to cure it. But God, we could kind of change that verse and say, but God, in His who is rich in mercy, cured us from those things. Now, He didn't take away the disease from the world. He took us away from the world. We still have that draw to this world sometimes, and that's our problem. You know, as Christians, that's our problem. I said it affects us to varying degrees, and that depends a lot on how we allow it to draw us, how we allow it to penetrate our mind, how we allow it to get inside of us. We have to be careful about those things. But God has a cure here. The cure didn't start on the outside, it started on the heart. It said, by grace you're saved. He saved us through the grace that was bestowed upon us as His Son Jesus Christ hung on that cross and shed His blood for you and I. He gave us that opportunity to be saved. It starts here. When it starts with me, then I have an obligation, don't I? You know, the world that we live in has rejected Christ. We can look around and the country that we live in, we can see that it has rejected Christ with all the things that are going on. We see more and more sin being accepted and brought in and legislated and things of this nature. We see, and all those things come in. We can see the rejection of Christ everywhere we look. But we have to understand that the cure begins with one. Begins with me. Begins with you. Until I allow that to fully indwell me and to fully have its way in my life, And understand in my life that I'm not fighting a physical battle. I'm not fighting something that I can see. I'm not fighting something that I can paint over or put a flower in front of and it be okay. Until I realize those things, I have no hope. This world has no hope. Until we realize we have to have a certain battle position and a certain battle plan. The first step to the cure is to change teams, isn't it? That's the first step to the cure. We look at the first 3 verses of here and it tells us that we played on the world's side. Excuse me. We played on Satan's side. Verse 4 says, but God had a better plan, a better way, a better team. And we swapped sides. Until we understand that, until the world understands that, until we get that message into the world, then there's no hope. So what do we need to do? We know the problem, we know the cure, so what do we need to do? Well, the first thing we need to do, I think, is what Paul's doing here. He's sharing with us that, you know, you played on the wrong team for a while. But God's got a better way. He shared with us that there's a better opportunity. There's a better way. There's hope. And I think that that's where it begins with us. We have to share. So I have to ask, have we been sharing God's Word? Have we been sharing what God has done? What Paul's telling us here, hey, I played on that side, but I figured out there's a better way. That on that side, all I ever found was heartache and hopelessness and aches and pains. But on this side, I found hope. I found happiness. I found more than I ever dreamed I could find. We sharing that with this dark world. And I think we also have to become a warrior. Now I believe Paul here is calling us to become engaged in the battle. I believe he's calling us to become engaged in the battle. Before they send anybody out into battle, they do training, right? They do the things that are necessary. And what do we need to do to become prepared? What do we need to do to be ready to go out into this world? I think we need to be prepared to become that warrior. The first thing I think we need to do is prayer. I think we need to pray for each other, for ourselves, for each other, for our community, for our nation, for our world. We need to pray for those things. We need to pray for the things going on. You know, I have no control over those things. I have no control over our community. I have no control over our nation. I have no control over our world. But I know somebody that does. I know somebody that has control over each and every individual in the world today. And guess what? I know them personally. And I can talk to them about it. If you're a Christian this morning, you know them personally also. And you can talk to them about it. And you can uplift them. You can say, hey, God, I need some help. I need some help being the witness you desire me to be. I need some help being the prayer warrior that I need to be. Lord, I need some help understanding your word and desiring to be in your word like I need to be. Lord, I need help being the witness I need to be in this world. You know, I'm not bragging or anything like that, but every day I pray, Lord, help me to be the witness you desire. Not the witness I want to be, because I'm sort of an introvert. I don't like meeting new groups and things like that. That's her department over here. I don't like that too well. But I want to be the witness God desires. Whether that's just through example, whether that's me saying something to somebody, whatever it may be, I want to be God's witness, the witness He desires. That's all I can ask to be, right? It's all I can ask to be is what God desires in my life. Lord, help me to be that. Help me to be the prayer warrior You'd have me to be. You know, I'm lacking in all these areas, and that's the reason I pray, Lord, help me to do this. Help me to understand this. Help me to be what it is You desire. You know, I see all the things going on in the world that I live. I see all these lost folks in this world. I have lost family members, work with people that are lost. I know that there's people that are in my community that are lost. Good people, but they don't know the Lord. And one of these days, when He comes and takes them out of this world, if they don't know Him, they're going to spend their eternity in the devil's hell. And what did I do to change that? What did I do toward the problem of this sickness in this world? What did I do? In Ezekiel chapter 22, verse 30, it says, "And I sought for a man among them that would make up the hedge and stand in the gap before me for the land, that I should not destroy it, but I found none." See, this is the Lord speaking to Ezekiel here, and He says, I look for somebody that would stand up. I look for somebody that would fill the gap. I look for somebody that would be what I wanted them to be. I found none. In Isaiah chapter 6, as Isaiah sees the vision there, you know, he cries out, or God cries out and says, "Who can I send, or whom shall I send?" And Isaiah says, "Send me. Send me." Do we have that kind of mindset in this world, and that kind of desire for what God would have us to do? I'm afraid a lot of times it's, Lord, I want to do, and I want to be, and I want to become, and then when He gives us opportunity, it's, Lord, I can't. Because that's the way I am. It's the way I was in a lot of instances, and still am to some extent. Lord, I want to do what You desire. He calls me to teach. Lord, I can't teach. It ain't me. I can't teach. He calls me to preach. Lord, I can't preach. You want somebody else to do that. I can't do those things. I don't have the abilities. I don't have the knowledge. I don't have... We could go on and on with that list that I don't have. And He said, it don't matter. I won't. We have to be willing, don't we? We have to be willing to stand in that gap. We have to be willing, like Isaiah, to say, I will. I will. Send me. Send me. I will. But I'm afraid a lot of times we find the same thing we found there in Ezekiel. He looked for somebody to stand in the gap, but I found none. I found none. You know, I think about the things of this world, and in my mind I see all the chaos and the things that are going on, and I think, you know, there's no hope. And then I think all's not lost because my God's in control. And I've stood here this morning and I've told you the problem, I've told you the cure, I told you the need. The truth is, He doesn't need us. He don't need us. If God decided to end all this today, it would end. But He's got a purpose in it. Like I said, one of these days He's going to separate His sheep and His goats. And this is part of the separation process. That's just the plain true facts. This is part of the separation process. He don't need us, but He allows us to participate. He allows us to help. You know, I think about the way we are a lot of times. When Levi and Josie were smaller and they couldn't really help as much as maybe they thought they could, they really wanted to help. They wanted to get out there and move dirt around with you, or try to drag a bag of mulch or whatever. You know, the bag of mulch weighed 50 pounds and Levi or Josie weighed 30 or 25 or whatever, and they wanted to drag that mulch and spread mulch. They wanted to help. Couldn't do a whole lot. But as they got bigger and could do a whole lot, that help kind of went away. Sometimes they don't want to. They'd rather play or play their games or whatever it may be as to help spread the mulch, the things that needed to be done. Now, I kind of feel like we're the same way. We say, Lord, I want to help. I want to do something. I want to help. And then when He says, okay, I've got this for you to do. So, Lord, I'm busy right now. I've got this I want to do. I've got this I need to accomplish. I got these things that are going on in my life. But He's looking for somebody that's willing to stand in that gap. So I ask you this morning, are you willing to stand in the gap? Are you willing to stand up and do those things? You know, that's that answer that only you can give. It all begins with, what did I say? One. You're that one. Are you willing to take on those tasks? If you would stand with me.